On the first day of my retirement, I ran into an elegant man in a suit on the train. He talked with me about mythology, empires, and the wrath of the gods. After an hour of chatting, the train exploded. His face melted away, revealing an iron mask underneath, and then he gracefully jumped out the window. The next second, my magic tentacles yanked him back. He swung his sword at my throat, and I caught the blade with my bare hand. His final thought was, "Too elegant." Trevor, who had encountered a retired hero on his very first train robbery, quietly fell asleep. My name is Czer, and today is the first day of my retirement. It sounds like something only an old man would say, but I'm only in my 20s. I had just pulled off one huge job. We killed the dragon of destruction. It was a purebred red dragon with a wingspan of over 270 meters. Its body alone, not counting the tail, was 45 meters long, and when it flew, it was like a burning mountain crashing down at you. The air was hot enough to boil your lungs, and the earth was baked until it cracked apart. Magma spread across the ground like veins. I brought 3 teammates with me, and we prepared for a full 3 years. The elven archer Fudon, the werewolf warrior Irina, and the human priest Nili. The 3 girls each had their own background and their own reasons, but their goal was the same: kill this dragon, then each go home. The battle lasted for more than an hour. The clouds within 100 miles were burned away by the dragon's breath. The ground split open again and again, and magma erupted everywhere. In the end, the dragon lay on the ground, with the reverse scale beneath its throat flipped out. That was the dragon's only weak point. I walked up with my sword in hand, the blade still carrying the chill of ice and snow. This sword was called Warm Snow, a dragon-slaying weapon I had obtained at great expense. "Though you are strong," the giant dragon suddenly spoke, its voice like gravel pouring into magma. "I refuse to submit. You rely only on external tools and are unworthy of the name of warrior." I drove the sword into its reverse scale and gave it a twist for good measure. The one still standing at the end is the winner. Dragon blood sprayed out, drenching all 4 of us. High-tier dragon blood is valuable stuff. It can strengthen the body and increase magical power. It's more effective than any miracle medicine. But before this dragon breathed its last, it hit me with something vicious. It cast a curse in the dragon tongue, targeting me alone. Dragon blood seeped into the left side of my face like magma being poured into my skin. When I woke up the next day and looked in the mirror, the entire left side of my face was covered in horrifying scars, as if it had been burned by hellfire. No healing magic worked. The curse clung to me like a disease eating into the bone. I had no choice but to make an iron mask to cover half my face. Breaking the curse would actually be simple. I'd just have to give up the power brought by the dragon blood. But that was impossible. I worked so hard to kill that dragon, so why should I? My teammates came one by one to say goodbye. Irina neatly packed up the dragon hide, dragon scales, and dragon meat, saying she was going back to the werewolf tribe. Fudon opened the pendant hanging around her neck and took a look. Inside was the silver moon gem her mother had tucked into it for her, saying that if she couldn't make it, she could sell it for travel money. She said she would return to the elven forest first. Nili lay on the ground with her head resting on my stomach, smiling as she said she was going back to the church to report in. I really missed the church's beds and breakfast. Then they all asked me, "What about you, Czer?" "Me? I'm planning to retire." 3 years ago, I somehow transmigrated to this world and discovered that it was extremely similar to the setting of an RPG game I had played. I spent 3 years carefully collecting every piece of equipment I could get, learning every skill I could learn, consuming every resource I could use, and then speedran the final boss. Now that the story is cleared, it's time for me to go live the retired life. I bought a train ticket to the royal capital of the Orn Empire, a VIP seat, the kind with 2 people to a compartment. Fortunately, the bed across from mine had been empty these past 10-odd days, so I had the whole compartment to myself, leaning by the window in the sun, flipping through light reading, my bones nearly melting from the warmth. The book was called Travels of Hista, and it recorded all sorts of strange and bizarre legends. Right then I was reading a passage about an artificial monster race, which said that in ancient times there was a mad empire that enraged the gods in the heavens and was struck by divine lightning until not even scraps remained. A mage in the empire, seeking revenge, created a kind of artificial monster that could devour other living beings and then transform into them. The bear in the illustration was drawn quite fiercely, vivid and lifelike. I was completely absorbed when the carriage door opened. A man came in, dressed in a suit and leather shoes, carrying a suitcase, handsome in appearance. The kind of person who naturally inspires goodwill at first glance. He placed a hand on his chest and nodded. Hello. I closed the book. Hello. A newcomer had arrived, so I could no longer have the compartment all to myself. After he sat down and saw the book in my hand, his eyes lit up. Travels of Hista? You like this book too, sir? I only started reading it these past 2 days, but it's quite interesting. He smiled and introduced himself as Trevor, saying he was going to the royal capital to seek out relatives and look for work. He became very animated when he chatted, and his eyes practically shone when he talked about that mad empire from the book. Mr. Czer, do you think that empire really existed? Maybe it really did, right? After all, there isn't any evidence proving it didn't exist. Once I agreed with him, his eyebrows practically started dancing, and he excitedly rapped on the table. I knew it. People who can teach at a magic university are knowledgeable, unlike the people back in my hometown, who only know how to slander me. That's right. I'm going to the royal capital to be a professor at Phoenix Magic University. The equipment and materials I'd saved up over the years as an adventurer really were enough to keep me fed for the rest of my life. But I didn't want to just sell them off casually. What if they were bought by bad people and ended up coming back at me like a boomerang? Better to get a job instead, keep a more regular schedule, and I'd feel more energetic too. Trevor and I chatted like that the whole way, and time flew by. A little over an hour later, the train reached the outskirts of the royal capital, with dense woods on both sides of the tracks. Boom! A tremendous blast. It was immediately followed by a chain of explosions, as if someone had planted explosives all along the railway. The shockwave made the window glass buzz, and scorching air poured in through the cracks. With a flick of my right hand, my staff was already in my grip. The reflexes I'd honed over 3 years of adventuring were no joke. But Mr. Trevor across from me was remarkably calm. He even had the leisure to reach up and straighten the hair that had been shaken out of place. Ha ha, Mr. Czer, you really are an interesting person. He said it with a smile, his voice still as bright and hearty as ever. What a pity the timing is wrong. Otherwise, I'd definitely find a chance to have a proper chat with you. He was still smiling, but his face began to change. That handsome face melted like a puddle of rotten mud, the skin sliding downward to reveal an iron mask underneath. Unlike mine, his mask covered his entire face, its surface engraved with exquisite patterns, looking both mysterious and eerie. Whoosh! A red signal flare shot up outside the window. Trevor flicked his right hand, and a wooden cane appeared out of thin air. He tapped the suitcase at his feet with the cane, and a dangerous aura instantly spread through the air. After doing all this, he leaped up and drifted out of the carriage as lightly as a butterfly. Sunlight poured over him as he spread his arms and closed his eyes. In his imagined scenario, the suitcase would explode the next second, flames and smoke blasting into the sky, with fragments of the carriage and my severed limbs spraying out together. But none of that would touch him. He was elegance itself. Then he would land in the woods and rendezvous with the subordinates who had already succeeded, and vanish into the depths of the forest. This operation had been set in the outskirts for ease of escape, and blowing apart the connections between the carriages was meant to delay the Royal Capital Knight's rescue efforts. Perfect. He was extremely satisfied with the plan he had designed. The next second, where was the explosion? Trevor opened his eyes in confusion. His subordinates had already gotten the item. The signal flare was proof. The connections between the train cars had all been blown apart too, yet the car he was responsible for showed no movement at all. A dud? He looked toward the car he had just jumped out of. Because of inertia, the train car was still sliding forward. Something was moving in the window. What was it? He sensed fluctuations of magic power. The next second, several tentacle-like things shot out of the window, so fast they were almost impossible to see with the naked eye. Magic tentacles? Trevor froze for a moment. Magic tentacles were a low-level spell that mages taught students to use for controlling magic power. The spell structure was ridiculously simple, and their strength was so low they would snap with a tug. At most useful for carrying a cup of coffee. But these tentacles flying toward him now were as fast as lightning. He had no time to react before his ankle was tightly wrapped up. An astonishing brute force came through, and Trevor's whole body was yanked back. He thought of the legendary sea monster Kraken, whose tentacles were said to be able to drag a battleship into the depths of the sea. At this moment, he felt like he was that battleship. He grabbed his cane with his left hand and twisted it, and the shaft split open to reveal a long, slender blade. This sword cane was custom-made, sharp enough to cut through iron like mud. He swung his sword at the tentacle around his foot. It didn't cut through. The tentacle's toughness far exceeded his expectations. It was like striking a thick piece of rubber, not even leaving a mark. The tentacles suddenly recoiled, and Trevor flew back into the train car several times faster than when he had jumped out. He crashed heavily onto the floor of the car and looked up to see that the caster was sitting by the window, still flipping through that copy of Heist travelogue in his hand. It was Mr. Czer, the professor from the Magic University who had chatted with him all the way here. What a pity. A trace of irritation appeared on Trevor's face beneath the mask. I had thought our next meeting would be in some cafe, and I could even treat you. As the organization's trump card, he would not allow anyone to interrupt his elegance. He usually liked to use magic, but what he was actually best at was swordsmanship. He saw himself as a magic swordsman, an elegant magic swordsman. He thrust his sword straight at my throat. Any spell would automatically be dispelled as long as the caster was taken out. This thrust was fast and precise, from a tricky angle, and he himself was still suspended in midair. The tentacles were still wrapped around his ankle. Yet he had actually managed to deliver this strike with astonishing flexibility. Against an ordinary mage, this strike would have been enough to pierce straight through. But I am not an ordinary mage. I reached out and directly grabbed the blade. No protective gear, no magical fluctuations, no aura of battle chi. He simply grabbed that sword, sharp enough to cut through iron like mud, with an utterly ordinary hand, and then the sword stopped, unable to advance even half an inch further. A trace of bewilderment flashed through Trevor's eyes. His sword could easily cut through iron armor, so how could it be blocked by a single hand? He had no time to think. My other fist was rapidly growing larger before his eyes. There were no flashy techniques, no magic power, and no battle chi, just a simple punch. But in his eyes, that punch was unimaginably fast, and so huge it blotted out the entire world. The last thought in his mind was, too elegant. Trevor, who had run into a retired hero on his very first train robbery, lay on the floor and sank into peaceful sleep. We were clearly chatting so nicely. How did it suddenly turn into this? Czer was completely baffled. He had clearly just said a moment ago that if there was a chance next time, he would invite me over as a guest. And the next second, he suddenly jumped out the window and even stuffed a bomb under my feet. If I hadn't reacted quickly, the bomb would have exploded. At this moment, beneath Czer's feet, that suitcase Trevor brought onto the train had already been frozen solid under a thick layer of ice. Otherwise, it would have exploded the next second. What is this? Some mysterious organization or evil cult or something? And then suddenly they pull off a terrorist attack like this. Czer grabbed the window frame with one hand and leaned his head out of the carriage to take a look. Many of the carriages had been blown apart, and the locomotive was nowhere to be seen. At this point, the tracks were littered with powerless carriages, and all around him, he could hear groans and panicked cries from who knew how many people. Everything happened in a flash. Many people with their faces concealed ran out of the carriages and kept charging into the forest, and from time to time there came the sound of something breaking, though it was impossible to tell what. The train's security personnel tried to intercept those fleeing people, but the other side had no intention of fighting and was focused solely on escaping. In addition, many passengers were injured and in urgent need of rescue. So in less than a minute, all the perpetrators had vanished without a trace. This was an organized, premeditated operation, and those carrying it out moved swiftly and efficiently. The train's security personnel sent out an alarm at once. Since they were already quite close to the royal capital, the capital's knights responded with remarkable speed. Czer also came out of his own carriage to see whether anyone needed help. He was still quite baffled by this terrorist attack. Before coming to the royal capital, Czer had made inquiries. And public order in and around the royal capital was supposed to be quite good. But what was this now? A train hijacking? So many serial explosions. Even on the borderlands of the empire where Czer had stayed before, this would have counted as a shocking major case. He never expected to encounter such an astonishing incident so close to the royal capital, let alone experience it firsthand. Meanwhile, the knights of the royal capital were dispatched the very moment they received the report from a magical messenger. The magical messenger was a blue, bird-shaped magical construct, and under the power of magic, it could travel more than 100 times faster than a carrier pigeon. In the capital of the Orn Empire, there are no positions like police officers. All public security duties and the like are handled entirely by the knights of the royal capital. The knights of the royal capital are responsible not only for protecting the capital's safety, but also for maintaining public order there. All public security cases that occur in the royal capital fall under the Knights' jurisdiction. Upon receiving the alarm, the Knights were immediately led on the mission by the vice-captain of the Royal Capital Knights. The Royal Capital Knights answered directly to the imperial royal family. The current vice captain of the Royal Capital Knights is named Jefferson Allen, and Allen is the royal family's surname. This operation was the first serious criminal case to occur since this young imperial grand princess took office as vice captain of the Knights. Since something like this happened just after she had taken over the position, if it were not handled properly, the Royal Capital Knights' public credibility among the people would inevitably be affected. Therefore, Jefferson Allen personally led the operation this time. At this moment, on the back of a griffin, Jefferson Allen listened to reports from her subordinates while piloting the griffin. This incident was a terrorist attack carried out by an illegal organization called Minka with the aim of seizing an item on the train. What exactly were they trying to steal? The platinum blonde imperial princess looked extremely angry. Anyone would find it hard to stay calm when something like this happened right as they had just taken office and completed the handover. We don't know. The aide at her side wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. The stolen item belongs to the Rhine family, and they refuse to disclose any more information to us. It is said to involve their privacy. The Rhine family is a highly influential great family in the Orn Empire, with roots in every field and considerable power. The item's already been stolen, and they're still talking about privacy? Jefferson's tone grew slightly heavier, and the deputy at his side was practically about to press his already lowered head onto the griffin's back. Do we have any intel on who carried out the robbery? Finally asked about something he actually knew, the man hurriedly pulled a stack of documents from his waist pouch. According to intelligence, the group behind this crime is the Black Death Church. The person in charge of this operation appears to be the Magic Swordsman, one of the 10 Black Fingers newly appointed within the Black Death Church, skilled in both magic and swordsmanship. Jefferson glanced over the documents. He nodded, then drew the sword at his waist and pointed it at the sky. Entire army, accelerate. Because they were very close to the royal capital, in less than 5 minutes, silver-armored knights riding griffins arrived in the sky. As for who was the leader of these knights, it was very easy to tell. There was only one woman among them not wearing a helmet, with long platinum blonde hair. Her features were exquisite, and her aura was also the strongest. Even the griffin beneath her was several sizes larger than the ones beside it, its fur gleaming golden all over, forming a sharp contrast with the mixed-blood griffins beside it, whose fur was mixed with plenty of brown and red. Unfortunately, they still had not arrived fast enough, because there were quite few police personnel on the train, and because the chain explosions they caused had thrown the scene into chaos for a time. Not a single terrorist was left at the scene, only devastation all over the ground. But quite surprisingly, not many people had died at the scene. This was not a terrorist attack intended to cause casualties. Most of the cries at the scene came from unlucky people who had fragments blasted into their bodies by the explosions, or who had fallen and broken a leg. Under the Knights' search and rescue efforts, the situation was quickly brought under control. The Knights cordoned off the scene, and the leading female Knight obtained the passenger list from the train crew and checked it one by one, first to prevent any terrorists from secretly remaining at the scene, and also because quite a few of the terrorists had boarded the train disguised as passengers. Otherwise, they could not have taken control of the entire train so quickly and effectively. Next, the Royal Capital Knights would use the missing persons on the passenger list to put them on the wanted list. Czer casually found a rope in his bag and tied up the young man sleeping soundly at his feet. Carrying Quiver's suitcase in one hand and dragging along this young fellow who fell asleep the moment his head hit the ground with the other, he followed the Knights' instructions to an open area and lined up to wait for the Knights to check the roster one by one. Czer had also tried to pull the mask off Quiver's face, but the mask seemed to have been fixed to his face with some kind of magic. No matter how hard Czer pulled, he could not remove it, instead nearly pulling the skin of his face away from the flesh beneath it, with blood pouring out. Afraid that letting blood spill all over the ground would look bad, Czer stopped. Because this retired hero was wearing half an iron mask on his face and was also dragging along a masked man whose face was constantly spurting blood, his appearance was somewhat out of place. An extensive empty space naturally opened up around him, which made him quite conspicuous. The leader of this group of knights, that platinum-haired beautiful girl, was also personally checking part of the passenger list. Seeing how distinctive Czer's side was, she signaled for 2 subordinates to come this way with her. You are. She walked this way while flipping through the list in her hand, while the 2 knights beside her remained on guard, their hands resting on their sword hilts, ready to draw at any moment. Although the girl in front of him seemed to be casually flipping through the materials in her hands, Czer could feel the magic surging beneath her body, like a cocked crossbow ready to fire at any moment. The closer she came, the more one could personally feel the astonishing beauty of the woman before him. Her platinum blonde long hair was simply tied behind her head, her skin fair. Two sharp eyebrows stood out on her face. Her otherwise delicate features were like a flexible sword that overcame hardness with softness. Her lips were red as blood, if not for the blazing sun hanging high above Cze's head at this moment. People might well have believed that the woman before him was one of the legendary blood race renowned for their stunning beauty. Ah, found it, Czer, no surname. She lifted her head, her gaze like lightning as she stared straight at Czer in scrutiny. In this world, most people had no surname. That was something only nobles possessed, and ordinary people generally had neither the leisure nor the inclination to give themselves one. Logically, as a leader, she should not have been standing this close to Czer, since no one could guarantee what kind of danger might arise. As the saying goes, a gentleman does not stand beneath a crumbling wall. But she seemed to have no such concerns. On the contrary, she seemed eager for something to happen. "What are you going to the royal capital for this time?" she asked, flipping through the documents. Czer pulled a letter from his bag. It was a letter of recommendation, recommending him for a position at Phoenix Magic University in the royal capital of the Orn Empire. He handed out the letter, and the guard beside the white platinum princess immediately stepped forward to take it. Only after confirming there was no problem did the guard pass it to Jefferson. "I was invited to work in the royal capital as a magic teacher." The retired hero nudged the still sleeping man at his feet. "As for this guy, he should be with the group that detonated the bomb just now. I just happened to catch him." He jerked his chin toward the suitcase in his other hand. "There, that's his bomb. Protect the commander." The two knights reacted intensely, driving the shields in their hands into the ground as two defensive magic barriers glowing with white light instantly spread out, with one on the left and one on the right shielding Jefferson. As for this lady knight herself, her reaction was remarkably calm as she examined the letter in her hands. There were many anti-counterfeiting marks in this world. For example, the letter she was holding at this moment bore, at the seal, the exclusive stamp of that person from the Magic University, and its distinctive magical aura could not be forged. "But, you're only 19? She could hardly believe her eyes. As one of the promising future heirs of the Orn Empire, she too had once studied at the Empire's highest institution. Finishing her credits early and graduating 2 years ahead of schedule at 21 had always been a point of pride for her. But what was she seeing now? What are you going there to teach? To be honest, no matter how absurd it sounded, with the letter in her own hands, the possibility of it being a lie was very small. Magitech mechanics. A new subject, added this year. Do you mind if I open this letter and take a look? Czer shrugged. Go ahead, there's nothing private in it. By the time Jefferson saw the contents of the letter, she already believed it 80 or 90%. Absurd as it was, the young man in front of her did not seem to be lying. Though she had only given it a rough glance, according to what was written in the letter, it was even that person personally who had invited him to the school to teach the course. Go check on the guy on the ground. She waved her hand, ordering her subordinate to deal with the person Czer had captured. My lady, this seems to be one of the Black Fingers, the magic swordsman, Trevor. At this moment, the guard at the side was also greatly shocked. The mastermind behind this terrorist attack had been captured just like that and was lying here like a dog? How did you catch him? Jefferson was also quite surprised, her beautiful platinum eyebrows lifting a little. No matter what, you did very well. After hearing Czer's brief account of what had happened, Jefferson nodded in approval, though she still felt it was absolutely too absurd. Everything seemed somewhat unreal, almost like child's play. The Black Death Cult is a notorious evil cult organization. The 10 leaders within this organization are all masters with exceptional skills. The former deputy commander of the Royal Capital Knights had to retire and recuperate because he suffered overly severe injuries while taking part in a mission to capture this organization. And now one of these Black Fingers was lying right in front of her, just like this? There are still a few things I need your help with later, Mr. Czer. Jefferson's tone became much friendlier. I need your help making a written statement about this incident, something along those lines. The more detailed, the better. Please wait for me a moment. She nodded to Czer. We're still quite a long way from the royal capital. In a little while, I'll have a griffin take you there. Please wait while I deal with this gentleman first. Under Jefferson's instructions, several knights from the royal capital came over and put several magical shackles on this gentleman, who was still sound asleep. This was a kind of iron shackle, engraved with a great many magic inscriptions. Anyone wearing these shackles would have their magic continuously drained by them, and both their stamina and magic power would keep ebbing away. Before long, The chaotic scene became fairly orderly under the knight's efficient cleanup. After mounting her very eye-catching golden griffin, Jefferson summoned one of her adjutants to take over command of the scene. Next, carriages would come to take these passengers at the scene to the royal capital, and at the same time assist the knights in making written statements and the like. After arranging everything, at the invitation of a rather burly knight, Czer also climbed onto the back of a griffin. "Danny, trouble you to take this Mr. Czer with you." With its enormous claws clutching Mr. Quiver, the golden griffin merely gave its wings a slight beat and easily soared into the air, stirring up a powerful gust of wind pressure. Following behind were the two guards who had just been at the side of this imperial princess. One of them was quite burly, standing over 2 meters tall, like a gigantic iron can, while the other guard was much more slender. "Sorry for the inconvenience, sir," said this burly guard knight. Although creatures like griffins are considered a type of large creature, the space on their backs really can't be called very spacious. High in the sky at this moment, the griffin was flapping its wings as it soared, and Czer was sitting in this burly knight's arms. This knight was frighteningly large, both in height and shoulder width. A single griffin carrying one person would be more than enough, but two men made it a bit cramped, especially when one of them was a man's man, a supergiant. Czer suggested sitting behind him, but was politely refused. "What if you accidentally fall off?" Those were the exact words of this big knight, Danny. And just now the suitcase bomb was still in Czer's hands, so he had to hold that too. In the end, Mr. Hero could only sit in Knight Danny's arms. And Czer, a tall man at 1.8 meters, actually seemed somewhat petite in front of this 2.2-meter man's man. "Hold tight, Mr. Czer, I'm going to speed up." The griffin was truly incredibly fast. Compared with the train Czer had ridden before, it was like heaven and earth apart. Flying really is faster than running. As the griffin's wings beat, the enormous royal city drew closer and closer in Czer's eyes. The gigantic city walls were a product of magic, and at a glance they looked extremely magnificent, like a giant lying on the ground listening to the heartbeat of the earth. The city gate of the imperial capital of Orn was enormous, opened and closed each day by two subspecies of behemoth. Although this creature is green-skinned like goblins, what flows through a behemoth's body is genuine golden creature blood. This species is famed for its immense strength. The main road by the city gate continuously swallowed and spat out all kinds of carriages, and people of many different races could be seen here. On the broad road, wide enough for 32 abreast, there were both horse-drawn carriages and drake wagons pulled by land dragons. This kind of draconic creature is considered rare in the borderlands. After all, most of them are carnivorous, and for the poor frontier, they are obviously less cost-effective than horses, which are only a bit slower but only need some fodder. They don't even need fodder sometimes. Just undo the reins, and they'll find some grass to eat on their own and come back automatically, and they're far gentler than these dragon-type creatures. Griffins are quite eye-catching wherever they go, not to mention that there was an extremely pure-blooded golden griffin here at this moment. Every passerby on the ground looked up at it. Come to think of it, this was also Czer's first time riding this kind of flying mount and soaring through the sky. Back when he was an adventurer, the former hero had actually thought about getting a mount for travel, hadn't he? But later he found that these mounts weren't even as fast as Czer running on his own two legs. So what would be the point of riding one? If danger came, was he supposed to carry the horse and run? But at this moment, Czer truly felt the meaning of a mount for the first time. Not as some practical tool, but simply as a fashion item. Only after flying over the royal capital on a griffin did Czer truly feel the greatness of the royal city before him. The enormous city walls cast enormous shadows, and the towering clock tower was also 100 meters tall. The entire royal city was built against the mountains. As far as Czer knew, the royal city was divided into the inner city and the outer city, with a huge moat between them separating the two. The base of the royal capital knights was in the outer city of the royal capital, occupying quite a large area. This knight's base had been placed right in a bustling district. As they flew over, Czer could see many shops lining the streets, packed tightly one after another. Czer even saw that in a space no bigger than a palm, there was a halfling-run fried food shop selling things like fried chicken cutlets and fried drumsticks. Presumably land in the royal capital was worth its weight in gold, yet building a knight's base here that rivaled a royal garden was enough to show how much the imperial family of the Orn Empire valued the knights. There was no other reason for choosing this place. It was purely because it was relatively close to the inner city. If anything happened in the inner city, the griffin riders of the knights could swiftly cross the moat and reach the area around the palace. The griffin landed in an open space in a place that looked like a garden, and as soon as it touched down, someone came over and led it away. The people leading the griffin away were also wearing simple knight armor. How should he describe it? It looked rather like beginner gear. Shiza thought to himself. Take Mr. Shiza to make a statement. Once he's done, send Mr. Shiza to Phoenix Magic Academy. Jefferson instructed. Yes, sir. Knight Danny forcefully stamped his right foot and struck his right fist against the left side of his chest as he responded loudly. What? Are you going to dedicate your heart to? Mr. Shiza, I still need to interrogate this prisoner, so I'll excuse myself for now. Please go with Danny to make a statement. If there's anything you need afterward, you can tell Danny, and he will do his best to meet your needs. The imperial princess nodded to Shiza, then turned and left with another guard. By the way, Mr. Trevor the magic swordsman was carried off by another guard. He was still sound asleep the whole way over, showing that Shiza's sleep-inducing technique was first-rate. Please come with me. Knight Danny turned slightly to the side and made a welcoming gesture with his right hand. The statement was taken quickly. Shiza only needed to briefly describe what had happened on the train, while the other details were supplemented by this reliable knight. As for the suitcase, it was turned over as evidence. Although it went quickly, before they knew it, it was already noon. So Danny invited Shiza to have lunch at the knight's mess hall. It had to be said that the interior of the Knight Order seemed very orderly. Along the way, there were hardly any idle knights to be seen. According to Danny, after the reforms, the Knight Order adopted a shift system, with knights basically working 3 days and resting 1, repeating in cycles. On the way to the mess hall, Shiza saw many knights lining up to eat there. These were basically apprentice knights, and they made up more than 90% of the entire Royal Capital Knight Order. Basically, all patrol work in the Royal Capital is carried out by these apprentice knights. They are a vital part of the Royal Capital's security work, and when going out, they usually work in groups of 3, each responsible for one area, patrolling for more than 8 hours each time in 3 shifts to ensure that someone is always on patrol throughout the day. There are only a little over 280 Griffin Knights like Danny in the entire Knight Order. The requirements to become a Griffin Knight are very strict. After all, taming such a ferocious silver race is quite difficult. When a griffin is not flying, it consumes about 25 to 30 pounds of meat a day. After flying, that consumption doubles or even increases by 1.5 times. So the cost of keeping a griffin is extremely high, and those who serve as griffin knights must also be carefully evaluated. In fact, obtaining a griffin beast is already quite difficult. Raising a hatchling is far more difficult than most people imagine. The hatchling must begin training before it is 3 months old and before its first feather has grown in. If it is too late, there is a 10% chance it will not accept its new family, and if it is also abused, its sense of rejection may increase by 20% each month. Captivity is considered abuse. If things are not done according to the hatchling's wishes, it is very likely to attack its owner. There is a flight ban in the Royal Capital, and only flying objects smaller than a sparrow do not require a flight license. But Griffin Knights have all obtained flight permits. By the way, casually spreading wind wings to glide around in the city will also get your flight license revoked, so be sure to read the Orn Royal Capital Flight Manual carefully. Otherwise, you will suffer betrayal 3 times, and in the end you won't even be able to become a hero. That would be quite troubling, wouldn't it? The food in the Knight Order can be said to be quite good. At lunch today, Shiza ate a steak and a large bowl of noodles mixed with tomato and minced meat. The steak had been marinated with spices. In this world, spices are a luxury for most people, but here, everyone can enjoy a large spice-seasoned steak for lunch. Knight Danny said proudly, the standard for each person's meal in our Knight Order is 120 copper coins. It was clear that, to him, being able to eat meat every day was quite a source of pride as an employee benefit for the Knights. P.S. In the Orn Empire, 1 gold equals 10 silver coins, which is approximately equal to 1,000 copper coins. As they walked toward the outside of the Knight Order, they could from time to time see knights brandishing long swords and practicing magic. The outer city of the Royal Capital is divided into 4 districts: East, West, South, and North. Of these, the East District and the North District are relatively more prosperous than the West District and the South District. Phoenix Magic University and the base of the Royal Capital's Knights are both in the East District. Shiza really did not want to keep troubling others. That was just the kind of person he was. You could say he's a bit independent or a bit introverted. Sometimes, even if he gets lost on the road by himself for 2 hours, he still doesn't want to ask strangers for directions. What he values most is being self-reliant. How could that do? You have only just arrived in the royal capital, and as a local, if I were to let you act alone in a place so unfamiliar to you, then for a night, that would be quite a discourteous thing to do. Danny insisted on escorting Czer to his destination. Phoenix Magic University happens to be not far from here, so let's not ride horses. How about I walk there with you? It would also give me a chance to introduce the royal capital to you. Unable to refuse such warm hospitality, Czer could only agree to the proposal, and the two set off on foot together. Walking on the royal capital's bluestone pavement, Czer suddenly felt a bit dazed. Back when he had been an adventurer on the border, every day had been tense. After defeating this boss, he would have to prepare the equipment and targeted potions needed for the next objective. On the border, there were mostly adults, and it was rare to see innocent children. Some who looked like children were actually halflings, appearing pitiful and miserable, but in fact had long since regarded you as a fat sheep ready for the slaughter. The people on the border had to endure the harassment of monsters every day, and because the national border was adjacent to the territory of the demons. From time to time, wanted criminals who could no longer survive over in the demon empire would come over to cause trouble. The people were all highly vigilant, and for the sake of survival, everyone had to think about many things every single day. But the people here were very different from those on the border. Life here had a strong, everyday atmosphere. On the broad streets, vendors sold fruit, and the owners sat dozing behind their stalls. Children playing and roughhousing could be seen everywhere on the road. Halflings did not have to be thieves. Here, they could also be ordinary shoeshiners. Some of the stalls on both sides were even selling magical items. They were mostly things like magic crystal balls, with magic arrays inscribed inside them. As long as you gave them a shake, the little flowers inside would sway and even dance. They looked quite interesting. With such a tall knight walking beside him, everyone around them made way. On the road, they saw a building that looked like an enormous tent, its framework made of many thick wooden stakes and then wrapped in cloth. At a glance, it was impossible to tell what it was for. Two tiger folk with shackles on their bodies stood to the left and right guarding the gate, and it was hard to tell at first glance what this place was. What is this place? Czer asked curiously. A circus? There was a hint of disgust in Danny's tone. No, this is a slave market. Oh, so this is a slave market. Back when Czer had been making a living on the Empire's border, he had also seen slave-catching teams. On the border, you would often run into wanted criminals, and basically all of them had been stripped of their citizenship. Those who could be wanted were usually highly skilled, and quite a number of them could be sold for a good price. Of course, the slave-catching teams on the Empire's border were basically all the sort of people with no bottom line. Because there seemed to be internal strife among the demons on the other side, taking advantage of the chaos to capture some refugees and bring them back to the royal capital for sale was something they often did. There was no real slave market on the border, because the poor folk over there could not offer any good prices. Czer was deeply disgusted by the practice of enslaving others. After leaving the slave market, they walked for about another half hour, and Czer finally arrived at the destination of this trip. Phoenix Magic University used a system of 2 semesters per year. It was now late July, and the students were all on vacation. Classes had not yet started, so the school was rather quiet. The main gate was quite imposing, and on a huge piece of obsidian was engraved, Phoenix Magic University, founded in the year 1266 of the new moon calendar. In the lower right corner there was also a line of small text. This stone was donated by outstanding alumnus Ryan Nix in new calendar year 288. On either side of the main gate were 2 black stone lions in sleeping poses. There aren't any other guards or anything, just these 2 stone lions. I'll see you off here. If you need anything, you can come find me at the Knight's headquarters. I'll be heading back now, Knight Danny said as he took off his helmet. Unexpectedly, beneath the helmet was a remarkably handsome face, with blonde hair and blue eyes, his features carrying an effortless air of authority, like a golden lion. Danny left. Czer walked toward the gate of the Magic University. Before he even got close, a voice came from the stone lion on the right side of the gate. The Magic University is on summer break. No visitors allowed. I'm here to apply for a teaching position. This is my letter of recommendation. Czer stepped forward and took the recommendation letter out of his bag. The stone lion on the left got up and opened its eyes, first stretching lazily before looking at Czer. Bring me your recommendation letter and let me have a look. These 2 lions were magical creations and looked quite lifelike. Could magic these days really create artificial life? As expected of the Magic University's high-tech, high magic products. Czer had originally thought his own spells were fairly decent here, but the very first new thing he saw here left him stunned. Creating life was a domain only the gods could touch. This seal? Good grief. Czer actually saw a surprised expression on a stone lion's face. Ugh. The stone lion made a retching sound, but after dry heaving for a long while, it still couldn't throw anything up. Knock knock, it stuffed its paw into its mouth and stirred around. After quite a while, it finally spat something out. It was a small bead glowing blue, with a bit of stone dust still on it. And when you thought about the fact that this was a stone lion, the thing seemed especially disgusting, like saliva. The two stone lions shouted together at the little bead. Old lady, the person you've been waiting for has arrived. Come out and receive him. After the stone lion on the left finished shouting, it quickly swallowed the stone back into its stomach. A voice Czer knew quite well came from its belly. It was Ms. Jessica, the dean of the School of Shaping Magic at this magic university, the one who had invited him to work here. Has Czer arrived? I'll be right there. Wait at the school gate for a moment. The voice coming from the lion's belly sounded a little muffled. Here, wait here for a bit. Just find somewhere to sit, said the lion on the right. Before its words had even finished, it lay back down again. Are you an idiot? Are you seriously going to make this travel-worn gentleman sit on the ground? The lion on the left started cursing directly, its voice like rolling stones. Come, Mr. Czer, is it? As it spoke, it adjusted its position on the stone pedestal where it had been lying, shuffling a little to the side to make an empty space. Here, sit here, Mr. Czer. It patted the stone pedestal with a paw bigger than Czer's head, warmly inviting him to sit down. In the end, Czer still chose not to sit down. He still hoped this lion gentleman could lie comfortably. Now this is the sense of distance that makes everyone feel at ease. Before long, an old lady in a mage's robe came jogging into Czer's view, waving as she ran. Over here. There was still ink on her hand, showing that she had rushed over in a hurry. Why didn't you send me a message in advance? I could have had someone meet you at the train station. She kept smiling as she spoke, her eyes narrowing into slits, and opened the school gate as she talked. She was an elderly woman with a scholarly air. She wore her silver hair neatly. Her face always wore a smile. Time had brought wrinkles to her face, but it had also given her gentle eyes. She wore a pair of gold-rimmed glasses and a plain mage's robe. At a glance, she looked like a gentle little old lady. What happened to your face? She immediately noticed the iron mask on Czer's face. How come you're wearing a mask like those old fellows from the shaping school? The magic studied by the mages of the shaping school was quite dangerous. A moment's carelessness with violent magical elements could bring the risk of disfigurement. Czer briefly explained what had happened. This is a curse caused by red dragon blood, and it should naturally fade within about 1 or 2 years. Oh, that's quite something. As long as you're fine. The old lady nodded repeatedly. As long as it gets better later. It won't do for such a young child to be disfigured before even getting a wife. Hearing this, the dean also let out a sigh of relief. She carefully looked Czer over from head to toe. Oh dear, I think you've even lost weight, she said with a smile as she reached out and took Czer's hand. She was Czer's teacher, and to him, she was no different from his own grandmother. This old lady had met Czer on the border while conducting field research, and because Czer had helped her complete some research tasks many times, they had become familiar with each other. The old lady had no children her whole life, but having been steeped in learning, she made people feel very comfortable in the way she treated others. To Czer, the old lady before him was an elder he respected, and this opportunity to work here had also been arranged by her. I only arrived today. There was a small accident on the way. I should have been here in the morning, but I didn't expect to be delayed until now, Czer explained. Oh dear, you've had a hard journey, a hard journey. As she spoke, she led Czer further into the school. After entering the school, the first thing that came into view was a remarkably veshy plaza, with a huge fountain standing in the center. In the middle of the fountain was a statue. What was carved on it was not a person, but 2 hands holding a book. This is the famous Hand of Truth. As they walked, old Jessica introduced the sculpture to Czer. Originally, the statue here was supposed to be of the first headmaster, but do you know what the headmaster said? The lady asked. What did he say? You should not believe in me, but in truth. So this statue became this, namely the Hand of Truth. She seemed quite fond of this story, and after finishing it, she started laughing herself. The surrounding area of the plaza was ringed by teaching buildings, and the old lady led Czer toward one of them. These teaching buildings were all built tall and grand, each with 7 floors, entirely different in style from the buildings outside. In this era, magic was the primary productive force. The old lady's office was on the 7th floor. Unlike what Czer had expected, her office was not very large, and most of the space inside was filled with all kinds of books and materials. Along the way up, he had also seen student classrooms. Since space was not an issue, the classrooms were all large stepped lecture halls. He had not expected the dean's office in a school to be like this. Sit, sit. It's a bit messy, haha. The office layout was very simple. A desk facing the sunlight, a tea table and sofa set to one side, and bookshelves all around. On the tea table sat a coffee pot and several crystal cups, and aside from that there was nothing else. Jessica motioned for Czer to sit on the sofa, then turned and pulled a contract out from her desk drawer. This is your contract. Have a look. If there are no problems, sign it. I help negotiate your weekly pay, 8 gold and 6 silver a week, with 4 classes per week. The Academic Affairs Office will arrange the class hours. What do you think? This kind lady handed over the pen together with the contract. A weekly salary of 8 gold and 6 silver could be considered quite high. Many commoners probably wouldn't even spend 2 gold in a month. A weekly salary of 8 gold already firmly placed one among the high-income group. The contract the old lady offered could be said to be quite generous. Czer merely gave it a cursory glance before signing it. After signing the contract and checking the time, it was still early. After Jessica tidied up her desk a little, she took Czer to arrange his accommodation. Teaching at this magic university included room and board. The staff dormitories were built on the far western side of the entire school. If no one told you, it would probably be hard to imagine that this garden-like building was actually the staff dormitory. It was like an independent mansion, enclosed by iron railings, with nothing inside but flowers and plants. The landscaping was quite good, and emerald green branches stretched out through the gaps in the fence. The apartment's main gate was tightly shut, yet there was no guard in sight at the guardhouse by the entrance. The dean seemed quite used to this sort of thing and walked straight over to the guardhouse, knocking on the glass of its window. Mr. Roy? Mr. Roy? She knocked several times in a row without any response. Finally, after the last knock, a large hand reached up from below the window and bent its fingers to knock on the glass as well. Stop knocking. Stop knocking. I'm coming. I'm coming. Only the hand could be seen, not the person. It wasn't until the guardhouse door opened that Czer suddenly understood. This guard turned out to be a dwarf. His limbs were quite thick and sturdy, and his mature face was clearly that of a fully grown adult, yet he was only a little over half Czer's height. Unlike the messy beards of other dwarfs, Mr. Roy's beard was kept in perfect order. It had been neatly braided, tied into little strands with colorful small rubber bands. He wore casual clothes, and his exposed limbs were all very sturdy. Mr. Roy, this is the newly arrived teacher Czer. Sorry to trouble you, but please register him and arrange his accommodation. If there's anything he doesn't understand, teach him more about it, the old lady said with a smile. Hearing this, the dwarf gentleman took a pair of glasses out of his pocket, wiped them with the corner of his clothes, then put them on and looked over the young man following behind the lady dean. Teacher Czer, right. All right, wait a moment. After completing the registration, Roy took a large ring of keys and led the two of them to arrange a room. After collecting the basic daily necessities, they began choosing a room. No, the trees outside this window are too dense, so the lighting is bad. Change to another one. This room's layout is poor. Who puts a bedroom directly facing the living room entrance? Change to another one. This place is too close to the stairway, not good. After much picking and choosing, they finally settled on a room. Throughout the whole process, Czer was not allowed to speak. The wisdom of those with experience would help arrange everything for him. After the selection was made, Mr. Roy also wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. At last, the arrangements for him were finished, and the dwarf gentleman withdrew as quickly as he could. I'll arrange for someone to come clean it for you later. Do you have any other plans this afternoon? The only luggage Czer had with him was a single bag, so he just needed to leave it in the dormitory. It had to be said that the staff benefits here were really quite good. His room included a study, a simple living room, a bedroom, a kitchen, and a bathroom. Basically no, or perhaps go out for a walk. Czer replied. Perfect, then. I'll go out with you later to buy some daily necessities, and tonight, I'll take you out for a meal to welcome you. In just a sentence or two, she had arranged everything for Czer perfectly clearly. What do you think? I have no objections. If you'll guide me around the royal capital, that would be even better. Then it's settled. Dean Jessica happily snapped her fingers. Come on, wait while I go change clothes. Dean Jessica returned to her office and changed into a simple set of everyday clothes. She looked like an ordinary old lady you could see anywhere. No one would have guessed that this old lady was one of the deans of the highest magical university in the Aorn Empire. The two of them left through the school's side gate. Since it was not the start of the school term yet, it was very troublesome for teachers to use the main gate. that huge iron gate. The side gate was not far from the faculty apartments. You don't need a key to leave through here. There is an artificial gargoyle here, and all registered faculty can leave through this way. Of course, students normally are not allowed to use this gate. Only students staying on campus during holidays could use this side. Face recognition in another world? Shiza thought this while the gargoyle scanned his face. But this artificial creation was different from the two stone lions at the school's main gate. The two at the main gate were much more lively, as if they had real life. Compared to them, the gargoyle here could only carry out simple commands. If one had to put it into words, it was like the difference between artificial intelligence and an app. Not far from the school's side gate was a shopping street. Because it was adjacent to the magical university, the shops here were all related stores, along with a small food street. Selling snacks students might like, all kinds of magical equipment, mana materials, magical pets, and various magic books, pretty much everything. Since the school term had not started yet, quite a few shops were closed. Here, Shiza bought all the daily necessities he needed, and there was no need to carry them by hand. As long as you showed the corresponding receipt, delivery service was provided here. They would deliver your purchases to the school gate, and you could pick them up there later. This was a tailor's shop, and Jessica was preparing to have several sets of proper clothes custom-made for Shiza here. This seemed to be a clothing shop specializing in private custom tailoring, tucked away in an alley. There were not many customers in the shop, and as soon as Dean Jessica walked in, someone immediately came forward to serve her, with a very respectful attitude. I'm not the one getting clothes made today. I'm having a few proper outfits tailored for the young man behind me. Do you have any good fabrics? It was obvious the dean was a regular customer. As soon as she entered the shop, someone came up to serve her. As she spoke, she personally began examining the fabrics hanging on the wall. Sir, this way please. A female staff member came over and led Shiza to have his measurements taken. Please raise your arms. One employee used a soft measuring tape to measure Shiza's chest, while another person beside them recorded everything at any moment. After the measurements were taken, he walked back to the old dean. Beside her stood a middle-aged woman with red hair, presumably the owner of the shop. Seeing Shiza walk over, she hurriedly asked, "May I ask what your requirements are?" "Something with plainer colors, as long as it's not too flashy." After thinking for a moment, Shiza replied, "Very well, what do you think of these fabrics?" the proprietress said. With a wave of her hand, several attendants came forward carrying multiple bolts of cloth. "These ones here are better for making linings. The material feels more comfortable to the touch. What do you think?" They're quite good." For Shiza, clothes were the kind of thing that only needed to be wearable. If you asked him what kind of armor was easier to move in, or where to pad with cotton so the breastplate wouldn't rub him bloody when he moved, he would know. But clothes really were beyond his area of knowledge. Fortunately, the dean could tell that Shiza did not understand much about these things, so she personally stepped forward to negotiate, occasionally holding fabrics up against Shiza for comparison. Just as the group was selecting fabrics, someone else walked in from outside. One look at their clothing told you they were nobles. A handsome middle-aged man walked in with a young girl, followed by two servants. He first strolled over as if by chance, then just happened to notice Dean Jessica choosing fabrics here. A delighted look immediately appeared on his face as he came over to greet her. "Hello, Miss Jessica. I didn't expect to see you here." "Hello, Mr. William." The old lady's expression, however, was far from warm. She merely raised her head and glanced at him. "Are you here to buy clothes? Or perhaps I might be here to grab a simple meal instead," the lady said irritably, just short of rolling her eyes at him. "Haha, you're truly humorous." This Mr. William, whose warm overtures had been met with cold indifference, was not angry at all, but instead pulled the girl behind him to the front and said, "Come, Baraka, greet Lady Jessica." Like her father, this young girl also had a head of bright red hair, and a pair of narrow eyes that currently held some embarrassed awkwardness, with long eyelashes, a straight and elegant nose bridge, and very thin lips that were tightly pressed together at the moment. Her features possessed both the sculpted beauty of Westerners and the reserved beauty of Easterners, like a cold and gorgeous rose. "Hello." Her voice was also crisp and pleasant. Jessica's attitude toward the child was clearly much better. A faint smile appeared on her face. "Hello, Baraka. You still look as beautiful as ever." "Thank you," replied the rose. "Our Baraka has admired you for a long time." This nobleman stepped forward, rubbing his hands as he spoke. Lady Jessica ignored him, and instead turned to introduce the man behind her. "This is Shiza, and also my disciple." "Disciple? I've never heard you mention one before." He looked quite surprised. "When did you take on a disciple?" Baraka behind him was also a little surprised, and her attention shifted to Shiza. About 2 years ago, at the border, the dean said flatly. As you can see, if you're still here because of that previous matter, then forget it. I'm a bit busy right now, and I still need to buy Shiza some well-fitting clothes. Then I was indeed being insensitive, wasn't I, shopkeeper? Mr. William flicked his red hair and raised his right hand in a wave. The gemstone on his sleeve reflected the light of the magic lamps in the shop, making him look a bit showy. Please put these two ladies' expenses on my tab. Mr. Shiza is truly a fine-looking talent. To become Lady Jessica's disciple, he must certainly have something exceptional about him. He praised, though somewhat against his conscience. Shiza thought about his plain clothing, the iron mask on his face, and his utterly unremarkable temperament, and felt that none of that had much to do with being called a fine-looking talent. Except for being a little handsome? Shiza thought somewhat narcissistically. You flatter me. Miss Baraka is the true shining gem and will surely become your pride in the future. Shiza also offered a string of flattering compliments. As the saying goes, nothing works better than flattery. I can't accept a favor for nothing. I'd better pay for it myself. Although I'm old, I can still afford the money to buy a child a couple of clothes. Lady Jessica's defining trait was indifference. She would not accept the slightest benefit. All right, I respect your choice, William said with a bitter smile. Speaking of which, my daughter Baraka will also be studying at Phoenix Magic University this year. She has long admired your Introduction to Magical Techniques course. So when the time comes, I'll have to trouble you to look after our Baraka a little more. Since childhood, she hasn't liked talking to others much, and whenever there's a problem, she always likes to bottle it up inside. I will not neglect any student who has a thirst for knowledge. On that point, you can rest assured. Shizu observed that when Mr. William had been speaking just now, Baraka tugged at his sleeve, seemingly wanting to stop her father from continuing the conversation. But her quiet plea seemed to have been completely ignored by her father. Tonight also happens to be our Baraka's 16th coming-of-age ceremony. I wonder whether you would be willing to honor us with your presence? Or perhaps, as Baraka's idol, you could give her some encouragement? I know this may be a bit presumptuous, but just think of it as coming over for a simple meal. Jessica noticed that Baraka behind him already looked extremely embarrassed. If they refused again, she would probably have to find somewhere to cover her face. Tonight? That's right, tonight at 7. Hearing this, William quickly pulled an invitation from his coat pocket and handed it to Dean Jessica. I hope Mr. Shiza can also attend my daughter's party. Take it, Shiza. Shiza accepted the invitation from his hand, and the latter looked quite pleased. Then I shall await your presence at home. We won't disturb your shopping any longer, and we'll take our leave first. They had ordered custom-made clothes at this shop, and the two maids went to pick them up. It was a very beautiful formal dress. After taking the clothes, they got straight into the carriage and left, arriving quickly and leaving just as quickly. After selecting several batches of fabric and having a few outfits custom-made, since they were going to attend a banquet tonight, Jessica also helped Shiza pick out 2 ready-made outfits. If Shiza were buying clothes by himself, he would probably buy several of the same style. He was completely hopeless at this sort of thing. By the time he came out of his tailor shop, Shiza had already taken on a whole new look. How should one describe it? Shiza looked at himself in the mirror, dressed in a dark blue formal suit, with the cuffs and collar pressed, making it look very crisp, and wearing an iron mask over the left half of his face. He looked like some flashy villain from an evil organization. The Lady Dean, however, was very satisfied with this look and kept praising him. Boys should also pay attention to their appearance. Dress nicely and look spirited. Originally, since you only arrived here today, as your elder I should have treated you to a good meal to welcome you, but plans can't keep up with changes. So when you get to the banquet later, just eat. Talk less. Their food is definitely very lavish. She instructed him. It also happens to be a good opportunity, and I can introduce you to some people. I know. I'll head over later and eat coolly and put on some weight properly, Shiza said with a smile. Ah, right, you should eat more. Just look at your face, weathered by wind and sun, you've gotten so thin. Compared with other places, the capital's transportation facilities are quite well developed. There are public carriages funded by the state, spread throughout the entire outer city, making travel in the capital much more convenient than in other places. But for tonight's trip, Shiza and Jessica did not plan to take a public carriage. Ms. Jessica had a more advanced means of transportation, a dragon carriage. It was a blue-striped drake, with a long horn growing from the top of its head. Its body was a full 4 meters long. Unlike those others that are called drakes, but are actually just some kind of giant lizards with a tiny bit of distant draconic blood mixed in. This thing was a bona fide draconic subspecies. It was boarded in the school stable and fed by dedicated staff. The driver was also employed by the school, probably one of the staff benefits. In the carriage, Jessica was talking with Czer, that Mr. William just now is the head of the Dex family, and that Barika is his only daughter. He previously wanted me to take Barika as my disciple, and I refused. It's not that Barika's talent is particularly poor, but I really don't have the energy to teach her. I rejected him clearly on that basis, but he still insisted on hoping that I would take Barika in. He only values my connections, that's all. Hearing you say that, I actually feel Barika is quite pitiful. With such a controlling father, her life must be pretty hard. Czer nodded beside her. Pitiful my ass. The old lady rolled her eyes. The entire Dex family will be hers in the future anyway. Several buildings at the school were funded by them, and you're feeling sorry for them? Remember this. Later, watch more, listen more, and talk less. Got it. Got it, got it. Czer nodded repeatedly. The carriage soon arrived at its destination. This time the destination was in the northern district. It was worth mentioning that there were checkpoints between the inner city and outer city of the royal capital. But there were also checkpoints between the 4 districts of the outer city. The sky gradually darkened, and by the time only a faint fishbelly white remained on the horizon, they finally arrived. From this alone, it was clear that the Dex family was highly influential. The blue-patterned drake could already be considered a very high-end mount, but here there were countless ones more eye-catching than it. Czer even spotted a unicorn. Although it wasn't pure-blooded, it was still a descendant of a legendary creature. It would not be an exaggeration at all to call this place the luxury car show of another world. Since Czer had come along incidentally, the invitation bore only Principal Jessica's name. In this world, there was also a role specifically responsible for announcing invitations. A fellow who looked like a half-elf spoke standard common and loudly announced the identities of the guests at the entrance to the banquet hall. The building used as the banquet hall was extraordinarily tall and spacious, covering an area as large as several football fields. A band was off to one side working their instruments, mostly orchestral ones, performing with great concentration. On the stage in the center of the banquet hall, there were performers invited by the host family, with plays, songs, and dances. This was because the banquet could only begin once all the guests had arrived. During this time, the host family prepared some entertainment for the guests who had already arrived. Principal Jessica's status carried considerable weight here. She herself was quite renowned in the royal capital's magical education circles, and in addition, she was also a legendary rank archmage. So when the staff announced her arrival, it attracted quite a bit of attention as well. Czer, following behind her, kept a straight face and stayed at a considerable distance behind her, drawing absolutely no one's attention, like an extra attached to some big shot. As soon as they entered the banquet hall, someone immediately came up specifically to invite Jessica to the second floor, where there was a parlor specially prepared for distinguished guests. Jessica followed that attendant up to the second floor, while Czer quietly separated from her. Tonight I'm going to eat my fill. Czer quickly blended into the crowd, and no one's attention lingered on him at all. Many long tables were set up in the banquet hall on the first floor, displaying all kinds of delicacies in great variety, covered with crystal domes to keep them warm. Waiters continuously moved back and forth among them, either pouring wine or replenishing fruit. Yet very few of the guests were actually eating. Each person held a wine glass and moved through the banquet, or swirled their glass. Those a bit more casual held a bunch of grapes or some nuts in hand, gathering in 2s and 3s to chat. Czer didn't know anyone, but honestly speaking, in his eyes, none of the people before him were as attractive as a steak. It seems like hardly anyone is eating, huh? Then I guess I'll just take these ice clams away? I mean, it doesn't seem like anyone wants them. This was a kind of shellfish produced in the far north, a precious magical ingredient. And many foods of this seafood type were laid out here, with waiters helping to slice them at the side. Czer had eaten this once before. It was very fresh, sweet, and crisp. He had the waiter cut him half a plate, then took plenty of other food and went to a corner of the banquet hall. It had to be said that the Dex family was truly extravagant. This banquet hall was built with extreme luxury. Even the load-bearing pillars were covered with magnificent relief carvings. This spot was the most inconspicuous of all. It was a place for guests to rest after growing tired of talking. What a great place. Czer ignored everything else and focused on enjoying the delicious food in front of him. To be honest, the people of this other world might not season food as well as Blue Star, but what they have going for them here is the premium ingredients. Czer, am going to find out what these frost clams that cost the same as gold coins actually taste like. Naya? An icy cold texture, a slight touch of wasabi flavor, and a sweetness like the fragrance of cherry blossoms. Truly powerful indeed. Hurry and serve it up. Just as Czer was feasting heartily, A voice rang out. May I sit here? It was a black-haired girl, who looked very young, probably only 15 or 16. She was as delicate and cute as a doll, small and petite. How tall was she? Not even 1.5 meters, right? Like a child, really? Of course. Czer replied unhurriedly after swallowing the meat in his mouth. After receiving Czer's response, she sat down directly at one side of the table, staring blankly at the vast banquet hall, looking extremely bored. So it wasn't that his appetite was too good, it was that the food just wasn't tasty enough. After sitting down with food for the third time, Czer thought this to himself. Delicious food always whets the appetite, Czer thought as he buried his head in eating. At some point, the attention of the young girl beside him shifted onto the man next to her. What a strange person. He came to a banquet, and instead of chatting like those people, he was stuffing himself with all this food here. He really eats way too much. Lucia Fuhr thought sincerely. This was already the third time he had gone to get food. How much had he eaten? A full 5 plates, right? 7 steaks? And countless other things besides. Originally, she had been bored, blankly watching the banquet crowd, but now she began secretly sizing up the person beside her from the corner of her eye. He could really eat. He had finished the food from the third trip as well, but Czer was no longer planning to get more, mainly because he had gone too many times and was starting to attract attention. Better rest for a while first and go again later. Czer's style was to keep a low profile. He didn't want to run into one of those Dragon King plot lines where someone comments on how much he eats, and then it ends with him showing off and humiliating them. What a hassle. Is he not eating anymore? Lucia, who had been getting ready to keep watching Czer's eating broadcast, noticed that after he finished, he didn't go get more. She couldn't help asking, "You're not eating anymore?" Seeing that it was the little girl beside him speaking to him, Czer replied, "Not for now. I'll rest a bit and go again later." "Aren't you going to get something to eat?" This was probably some family's child, hiding out here just like him. No need for me. I'm not hungry yet." She blinked curiously. "Aren't you going over there to find someone to talk to or something?" "Haha, not me. I don't know anyone there. And wouldn't it be awkward to discuss topics I'm unfamiliar with among a bunch of strangers?" Czer said with a smile. That's true." Lucia nodded thoughtfully. "Hello, my name is Lucia." "Hello, my name is Czer. Are you really not going over there?" The girl asked. "I thought you meant all like talking about things like that, for example affairs of state, where we're started fighting again today, or which family's young lady is pretty and still unmarried, and so on." Czer did like dirty jokes, but honestly, bragging and bullshitting with a bunch of strangers was really quite boring. "It's alright, I guess. What I care more about is what kind of honey was used to flavor this dessert. It has a floral fragrance." Czer took a dessert from the tray of a passing waiter. It looked like a set milk pudding, drizzled with a ring of honey and frosting sugar, and garnished with nuts. It tasted very good. "Didn't you say you'd rest for a bit before eating again?" Lucia said. Czer contentedly scooped up a big mouthful of dessert and stuffed it into his mouth. The stomach for dessert is different. This seemed to hit her funny bone, and the little dark-haired girl covered her mouth and laughed. "I guess you're still not full, right?" she said as she stood up from the stool. "How about I go get you some more?" To be honest, the suggestion did tempt Czer, but after hesitating for a moment, he still refused. He still felt it wasn't good to trouble others. As mentioned before, he was the kind of person who would rather wander around lost for 2 hours than ask someone for directions. "Better not, I guess. It wouldn't look good if I ate so much by myself." Czer waved his hand. "Don't be embarrassed to take some. If you're hungry, you should eat." Seeing that Czer was tempted, she blinked at him. "Wait here, I'll go get you some more tasty things." She walked lightly toward the table laden with food and quickly came back with nearly half a plate. She hadn't taken much either, just a tiny bit of each kind of food. Probably because she didn't know how much more Czer could eat, so she didn't take much. "Please enjoy, Mr. Czer." Then I won't stand on ceremony." Altogether, she hadn't taken that much, and Czer quickly finished it all. There was only one kind of food left on the plate, something that looked like a rock. Czer had noticed this thing earlier too, sitting in an exquisite insulated serving dish. So it was definitely something edible, but since he didn't know what it was, he hadn't taken any. Miss Lucia had helped him get some, but he didn't know how to eat this rock-like thing. "Use this." Lucia handed over a small cone-shaped iron pick and said, "Poke it in here, then twist it open, and then dip it in a little of this sauce." She gestured at the rock-like thing. Czer looked where she indicated and saw a small opening in that spot on the rock. He did as she said, poking the iron pick in and twisting, and the rock opened up, revealing something inside that looked like oyster meat. Then he dipped it in the brown sauce in the small dish beside it, and it tasted unexpectedly good, like eating cream-flavored jelly. but the texture was much fresher and lighter. Is it good? The girl blinked expectantly. It's good. Shiza gave a thumbs up. Hee, right? Can you still eat more? Lucia wanted to see just how much more he could eat. Shall I go get you a little more? Something novel. Wait here, I'll be right back. Without waiting for Shiza to speak, she immediately left, waving back at Shiza as she walked.